Hey.
So, one must imagine a knight, or a crusader that is raiding the eastern kingdoms for gold and land. They don't imagine a man with a bucket on their head. They imagine a steel man. They imagine a man made of willpower and justice and war. And a great part of that is their armor. The knights of medieval times were completely symbiotic to their armor, especially those of Britain. And one of the key elements of understanding this and understanding these concepts, or understanding anything, period, is its history. It just so happens that the history of the armor of knights in Britain is rich as well as interesting. And sorry, it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, it just so happens that the influences of armor and its origins are completely important and relevant to understanding its cultural heritage and culture surrounding the period. So, really, in my opinion, the best place to start speaking about this is Rome. The Roman occupation and invasion of Britain. And this started about half a century after Christ's death. About 43 AD, Romans were looking for materials, and they were looking for land, and they found it in Britain. And they didn't invade at first, but they invaded shortly after, so it doesn't really matter. They took over pretty much the entire southern half of Britain, and most of the islands, so probably Ireland and some of Wales, those places. And so they went there, they established colonies, they established kingdoms, and they established extensions that were very militaristic, which kind of ties into what feudalism becomes out of this, but we'll get into that later because it is important to understanding the culture around armor. But in the end, the Roman occupation is important to understanding 3 things. Their culture mixed. They didn't just leave. Britons and Romans mixed to become what Britons then on would be essentially. And another thing is they had tons of iron. And with the Roman mining techniques coming in, they now had access to the iron. So they could completely They could make armor now. that's essentially what I'm getting to. And they're not the only culture who influenced what knight armor was. Chainmail was invented by the North Europeans. That's not necessarily Vikings. Vikings kind of came later, but North Europeans, Celtics, weird cold people, all that. And they invented chainmail, and they would either bring it through raids, or when they started becoming Christian, the Christian trade routes extended by the Roman Catholic Empire spread everywhere throughout Europe, and chainmail was kind of being spread from the north everywhere, and it was becoming more and more common. So then you have the Romans and the Vikings, and these not Vikings, I keep getting that mixed up, but those cold people. We'll just call them cold people from now on. So the cold people and the Romans mixed. Feudalism came out of this, which influences what armor means to a knight and to the people around it. So for a knight, they usually started out young, and so they had to get up. They didn't start with a full set of armor. They might have started with some chainmail or some padded cloth armor, but through work and through gaining ranks and gaining land through war with the feudal system, they would be able to afford more armor, and this armor was theirs. and they had to work for it. And you didn't replace a full set of armor. The armor you had is pretty much the armor you kept when you grew to your full size. And so this kind of leads into the symbols of armor, the religious symbols they would put on it, the symbols of their barons they would put on it, that identified who they are, and would kind of holy war is a form of worship, and chivalry is a form of worship. And the Roman Catholic religion really influenced what the chivalry code was, and this could be identified by the religious symbols on their armor. Other things to take into consideration, that it was not just the knights who would wear armor, it was barons would wear armor too, and kings would wear armor too. But it wasn't for battle necessarily, it was more of a symbol, and so they would adorn it with jewels and gold. And a perfect example of this is Greenwich armor from the Elizabethan era. I think that's what it's called. Elizabethan era, in which it would be coated in silver, so it was blue metal, and it also had gold adornings, and it was absolutely stunning and super expensive, so it was an extravagant display of wealth. And through this you can kind of understand that armor was important individually to the knights as a religious symbol, as a personal symbol, and to the people around them that they protected as these symbols of justice, or maybe fear if the baron they worked for was a jerk, or But anyway, these the context from these is really important in understanding what armor is mentally to knights, what it meant for them, and why it looks the way it does, and it's just really interesting. So it really shows its complexity and its worth, and it helps lead. These factors also help lead to the culture of the entirety of Europe, and it perfectly embodies the cultural aspects of war and religion and expansion, and armor ties into all of these in this section, and it's just a great way to show how history happened in this way. So I gotta get back to reading.